the most productive engineers who were having AI write the code for them were actually the developers who maintained the discipline for breaking down the tasks that they were going to tackle, even though the AI was actually going to write some of the code for them. So you got to let that sink in a little bit.
Howdy, everyone. Welcome back as we prepare for the final keynote of day 2 for the Scale with AI Summit 2024 with none other than Howdy co-founders themselves, Jacqueline and Frank, who will be coming on here shortly, sharing a bit more about how Howdy and you can leverage AI to empower an AI-enabled workforce. And just after our conversation, Jacqueline, a few days ago, with where were you sharing with your vision where Howdy's going and just the idea of how you guys are approaching the AI-enabled workforce. I thought it was perfectly aligned with where a lot of our sessions have actually lined up with this topic and how we're enabling people and leveraging this technology to save time and grow our businesses. So I'm looking forward to this session. And I think you said you had a presentation and some Discord that you guys are that you had prepared. And if you're all set, then I'll let you guys take the stage, give a little background about who you are, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darby. I am very excited to be here today with all of you. I'm joined by my co-founder, Frank Licea. I am the CEO and co-founder of Howdy.com. He is the CTO and founder of Howdy.com, and we started the company in 2018. Our company helps, I talk about it a little bit in the presentation, but our company helps US companies hire and manage their developer team in Latin America. We do other roles as well, but I would say our core competency is in software development. Now, I'm really excited to share our keynote talk with you, and hopefully it puts a nice little bow on everything you guys have been going through the last couple of days. Frank, you missed it, but Darby had asked the audience how it has been going, and we have a really high bar that we need to hit because they said it's been the best and it's most useful. So I really hope we hit it.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. We've got definitely a wealth of knowledge to share from the 100 or so customers that we work with, the 300 or so teammates that we work with. We watch them use AI, watch them do software development, watch them do marketing projects and everything. So I think we have some little insight to share, hopefully.
Yeah. And the way that this talk is going to go is I'm going to present a bunch of information. The way I typically like to do presentations is think of it like a subtitle. I'm talking and what I'm saying is going to reflect what's on the slides. So it might go by very quickly if you are the type of person who likes to do screenshots. Don't worry, like Darby said, it's all recorded and you'll be able to go back to it on certain slides, like the first couple of ones where I'll have charts and graphs. I will pause on those a little bit longer, but for the most part, it's more designed to help you absorb the information that I'm sharing, especially when we get in these virtual type of environments. Sometimes it's hard to just hear on the go. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to pass it over to Frank, and then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. So hopefully we have a lot of time together to answer all of your questions that this presentation brings up. So without further ado, I'll get started. And let me just see here. Tell me if you guys, when you guys can see my screen.
We can.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so this is the idea of the untapped potential of AI, which like I said, you've probably been exposed to some of the crazy things that AI can do and how it can help you over the last couple of days. I'm going to talk a little bit about how there are two types of people when it comes to AI right now. There are the enthusiasts, and then there are the skeptics. Now, the enthusiasts are excited about the potential of AI to revolutionize various industries and improve our lives and improve processes. They see AI as a tool for innovation and efficiency. And then there are the skeptics, and the skeptics are people that are concerned about the AI impact. They're concerned about the displacement of the human workforce. They're concerned about displacement of jobs or income, and they have a fear that AI will take over and automate many tasks, and leading to widespread unemployment. And of course, there are people who vacillate between both. Some days they're excited and some days they're scared. But the feeling about AI is extreme no matter where you stand. because we have the people that are very enthusiastic about it. We have the visceral fear about it. We have the extreme skepticism. And then, of course, like the very cautious optimism. AI creates a lot of emotion, whether it's positive or negative. It's not like you could just be like ambivalent about it. But I'm here to tell you that this is nothing new. This is more or less how it's always been. Any kind of major advancement that has ever come to humanity and humankind has created widespread fear. In the 1400s, when the printing press was invented, there was widespread fear for twofold. One, that the scribes were all going to lose their job and they were going to go hungry and die, and that giving information to the masses was going to cause human implosion. And all it did, it actually created a $1 trillion industry with creating books and sharing knowledge and sharing information. And same thing happened in the 50s when computers were invented. There was widespread fear that there'd be no need for admins anymore or data entry jobs, when we all know how unbelievable computers have helped our economy. When ATMs were invented, people thought there was going to be no need for bank tellers anymore. When the World Wide Web was invented, there was all this fear about really displacing the haves and the have-nots, and then same thing with smartphones. So it's more or less what's always happened. Now, this chart, this was done a year ago, September of 2023, and this was really the hypothesis of how much AI will impact each job, whether it's IT or finance or customer service and sales, operations, HR, marketing, legal, supply chain. The orange here talks about how much of their job will be automated or significantly altered. And then the yellow are what tasks that are not so much going to have, it's like more of a small impact. And then the blue is no impact. As you can see, information technology has the biggest offset based on what they're thinking AI's impact on roles are. And it varies based on departments, roles, what sector you're in. So the invention of artificial intelligence has sparked concerns, again, as we all know, about the potential impact on opportunities. However, similar to past technological advances, AI is more likely to transform the nature of work rather than eliminate it. And something we always say at Howdy is, based on the past, the creation of something has only created more. And so as AI automates these repetitive tasks and it enhances productivity, it will also create more income earning opportunities and redefine existing roles. And so we're going to require all of us, every single person on this call, to upskill and adapt our skill sets. And at Howdy, we are leaning into this and we're thinking, how can we arm our team to be the most AI-enabled contributors out there? We want them to be educated on the AI tools best available for what they need, so they can all be mini CEOs and mini CTOs of an army of AI agents. So if we go back, you can see 75% of IT is going to be significantly altered and automated. So how can we enable them and give them the tools that they need, so that now all of a sudden they've got a team of AI agents doing tasks that they used to have to do very manually. Now, I'm sure some of you guys have heard this before, but they say Amazon is the company of 100 CEOs. Now, every single person on this call or every single company can have an infinite amount of CEOs and CTOs and CMOs and all the CXOs out there if they're trained on how to do it properly. But we all know the learning curve is steep and it's constantly changing. And you may feel behind, but don't worry. We surveyed thousands of people across the USA at Howdy. And the good news is only 39% of people have used or are using AI on a somewhat regular cadence, whether it's once a week, every single day. Only 39% of the US working population is using AI in some way. This means even being on this call puts you way ahead of more than half the working population. At Howdy, we're making a huge investment into the AI enablement of our team. As I mentioned earlier, we help companies hire and manage software developers in Latin America. And we plan to have every single one of them trained on the highest value AI tools. So each of our developers can produce 10 times more than any other developer. And we're going to talk about how we are going to do that. We're going to share all of this information on this call, and it's actually way simpler than it may seem. But before we do that, let's start with the basics. I know you guys have had a few days of fun AI, but I always like to go back to the basics when I'm doing a presentation. What even is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is a field of study that involves the development of computer systems capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as learning, problem solving, and decision making. But what does that mean for all of us on the call? It means we can use it to our advantage. It means that we can increase our productivity by 10 times. We can get rid of boring, repetitive tasks. There are new untapped opportunities that will improve our decision making, and it will enhance our spending power. There's a lot more it's going to do as well, but those are like the key ones I look at. When you think about AI-powered productivity, when we surveyed the folks that were using AI, 65% said they save time on repetitive tasks. 55% have improvement with their workflow optimization. 70% created more resource allocation efficiency, and 80% was able to increase their focus on strategic work rather than just very tactical in the weeds work. We know AI dramatically increases productivity, but let me dive into just one of the biggest time savers AI has helped with me. So I can give you guys an example of how I use it and how I think about it. This is brainstorming and drafting. Now, I give a lot of presentations, and I've spoken at TechCrunch, Y Combinator, South by Southwest, and the like. And this used to be my normal workflow before giving a talk. This is what I did every single time. It would take me on average 50 to 70 hours. The reason being is because I would spend about 10 to 15 hours doing research, whether that's gathering information, reviewing industry trends, analyzing conflicting viewpoints. I'd spend another about 20 hours brainstorming different ideas, sketching concepts, storyboarding, outlining the presentations, getting feedback from peers. I'd then spend the next 20 to 30 hours doing the creation of the content. That's writing the script, that's creating the presentation, that's designing the presentation, that's refining the visuals. You can get really lost in the hours it can take to do a presentation. And then, of course, I would spend 2 to 5 hours reviewing, revising, fixing, presenting, practicing. The previous presentation workflow is meticulous, and it's an insanely time-consuming process. It requires like significant time to research, brainstorm, create content to deliver a presentation that is polished and impactful. Now, with AI, I have a much faster way of doing this. So this is what I do now. So that was what I did a couple years ago. This is what I do now. There is this AI tool. It is called ChatHub. You don't need to remember it, but just so you guys know, it is basically like 6 LLMs in one. So normally if you were to go to ChatGPT and talk to ChatGPT or Llama or Claude or any one of those, you would have one screen. This is like 6 of them in one. So I use ChatHub, a tool with 6 powerful large language models to brainstorm and generate ideas. It's like I'm talking to 6 people at the exact same time. I then leverage the 6 different LLMs to refine my ideas, clarify key points, and I use the different components to understand different perspectives. It's weird. It's like talking to, say, 6 different people. And then I take all that information and I work with ChatGPT to structure the presentation effectively. So these 6 LLMs massively shrink my research, brainstorming, and content creation from 50 to 70 hours all the way down to 5 to 7 hours. It's insane. It's actually the reason I'm even able to give this talk, because had I been asked a couple years ago, I would have had to have declined because I wouldn't have had enough time. It's November 2024. If you guys were ever part of a larger organization, or if you're currently part of a large organization, this is like heavy into budget season. This is heavy into like strategic planning for 2025. Setting aside 2 weeks to work on this presentation would just been a non-starter. But the great news is we were able to say yes because it wasn't that much time anymore. And now I get to talk to all of you guys and also learn from you when you ask questions. So it's so exciting, the opportunities it's been able to create. So saying yes to this presentation in 3 easy steps: brainstorm with ChatHub, storyboard with ChatGPT, and then create the presentation with this great tool called Beautiful.ai. That's how I was able to expedite this entire process. It was amazing. And the benefits, of course, as you guys know, it saved me 10 times. It saved me 10x the time. It improved my efficiency. I have a seamless integration with Google Slides, which is the one I always use to make all my presentations. And then, of course, it helps me with visuals and effects that I'm trying to convey to the audience. So 54 hours saved with a new workflow, going from 60 to 6 hours. That's a 10x improvement. Now, as the CEOs, founders, and CEOs on the other end of this call, I've earned 54 hours back that I can spend doing other things that are mission critical to Howdy.com. I even use LLMs to be my advisor on all aspects of all subjects. Here's another quick example. We have a corporate attorney that charges $750 an hour. Before AI, I would have to consult my attorney about everything, even dumb questions, because you probably didn't want to Google random questions that you had about certain legal structures, whether it was from contracts or implications. I had to consult them for everything, and they charge for everything. Trust me, there's no freebies in the land of the law. Now I upload all of our red lines, I get a deep understanding of what's happening, and then I send to the lawyer to execute exactly what needs to be done. What used to be a 10-hour bill at $7,500 is now $750, because I'd get all my information from just talking back and forth with ChatGPT. I understand what needs to happen. I reach out to my lawyer and I say, hey, these are the changes we need to make. It's so simple, and it saved so much money. And there's millions of other ways to use AI to help save time and money. There are content creation tools that you can use for text generation, for image editing, for video editing, for multimedia synthesis. There are AI task automation tools for calendar scheduling, email management, social media posting, data entry automation, project management. There's data analytics tools, Google Analytics, Tableau. I'm sure there's a bunch more. That's just a couple. Of course, there's creative ideation tools for brainstorming, for visual inspiration, for empathy mapping, for analogical reasoning stimulators. And then, of course, a gazillion AI tools for software development. It can be overwhelming. You probably feel like you're not using AI enough. And while we can all definitely be using AI more, I'm going to help you not feel so overwhelmed by it. I'm going to help you feel empowered and clear on what to do next. So think of it like hiring someone. You don't want to hire 10 people at once. That's too many people to onboard and too many people to manage. You can't go from 0 to 10. It's too insane. That's the same thing with AI, and the same thing with AI tools. Start to use AI for one thing, just like you hire one person. As a founder CEO, as you guys are probably all very well aware of, I used to have to do every single job. You guys used to have to do every single job, or some of you might still be doing every single job. From sales to bookkeeping to social media to web development to whatever it is that you're doing, to content creation, you name it, you probably had to do it all. And if you are lucky enough to hire people to offset it, a lot of it still falls on your plate. Think of AI the same way. Let's use customer service as an example. Think of it like you're going to hire and employ this AI agent to take over a majority of the customer service work you're doing right now. So if you have a business that you're working on, and let's just say you have a lot of back and forth that you have to communicate with customers on, think about that. Not the work that you want to do, not that it's not saying, hey, I've got all this work I want to do. Think about just like the work that you're doing. If you have a lot of customer service communication that you have to do right now, that's the work I want you to think of. It's the work that you're doing right now. You need to hire this AI agent to take over a good chunk of what you're doing that you'd rather not be doing. You only hire people when you have work to offload. This is how I like try and tell everybody how to think of AI. You only want to use AI if you have work you have to offload. You only hire people when you have work you have to offload. It's the same thing. It's not different. There's no difference. So what I would do is I would then say, okay, I want to hire this customer service rep. And then I want to spend the next few days or weeks learning about the different customer service AI tools so I can employ one. Just like you would spend days or weeks looking for the right customer service person, you want to spend the time to understand what's going to be the best tool for you. Then use that tool, employ that tool, train yourself on it, trial it, educate yourself, iterate, monitor, just like you would with a real person. You need at least 2 weeks focused on this. Again, the analogy is so comparable. When you bring on a person, you want to work with them closely because that's how much time you need. And after the 2 weeks of onboarding, you should a good way to measure it is you should be 10xing your productivity in that realm. And that's exactly what we're doing at Howdy.com. Do you remember this chart from a couple slides ago where there was a ton of AI tools for software development? Our goal is to get our developers to be a mini CTO with their own agentic workforce underneath them. So how we do that is we first bring on a developer and we understand their current AI capabilities. So think about it with yourself too, or think about it with someone on your team. Where am I at with my current AI capabilities? Where am I at with my current workflows? What are the things that I need to achieve in this role? So with this developer, if they are a front-end developer, or if they're a UI UX developer, they're going to need different AI tools than someone that is a data analyst or a backend developer or an app developer. So we need to then select the appropriate tools for the work that they're working on. And then we need to educate and upskill them and train them. And then we implement the AI solutions with whatever it is that they're working for, and we monitor and optimize. It's so much work in the background to have to keep your finger on the pulse and keep understanding what's going on. So we have a whole team. That's all they do. They're researching, they're learning, they're updating our information, and they're training our developers to continue to use best practices with the AI tools readily available. Because each dev we place is 10x better than any other dev you can hire at another company. And you can do the same thing for you. And it's why we love Gen AI University and all the AI training and education that they're doing. So much of AI is knowing the right tools for the appropriate activity. So I want to do an activity right now. I want everybody here that's listening to imagine the biggest time suck of your job right now. Now imagine a world where you had an unlimited budget to hire someone to help you with that. An unlimited budget, the most annoying part of your job. Who would you hire first? What role would that be? Oh man, I remember for me, that first role was a bookkeeper. Like, please, for the love of God, I do not want to be sending and creating invoices every single week. This is driving me crazy. And then I don't want to have to do the AR. That was like my biggest first hire, my hire I was so excited to hire. Whatever popped in your head just now, that is the AI path you should start with. This is like eating an elephant, okay? One bite at a time. Just start with one thing that you can offload to this quote unquote AI agent. Once that's handled, move on to the next. AI isn't overwhelming. We just need to treat it like it's one role at a time. And soon enough, you'll have an army of efficiency and agents 10xing your productivity and output. Okay, I've been a speaking head for the last 30 minutes. I'm going to pass this over to my CTO, Frank, who I introduced you to earlier. And then, of course, we will open it up for questions.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. As part of my role in my job, I definitely work with AI tools, exploratory and everything, but I've never actually sat down. It's always been exploratory. I've never actually sat down and thought about it more strategically in that let's put on the hat of replacing a specific role. And just hearing you describe it, my intuition is that if I look at it in terms of managing a role, managing responsibilities within the company, then I would actually approach it completely different. So I think that's pretty insightful. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share a little bit, some tips and tricks that we have noticed working with so many different companies and their teams and so on. A lot of these teams, the majority of them are certainly software development teams. But what I noticed is that really, although the medium is software, the overall idea is the way that people work and collaborate. And something that we found super interesting in our own surveys and in the surveys that we've also commissioned by professional surveyors and market researchers is the difference in self-reported productivity for people who are using various AI tools. We noticed by looking at the data that people self-reported a difference from up to 40% feeling that they are up to 40% more productive down to like smaller numbers, down to like only 10% or so. And we took a closer look to see how people were using these tools, how they were organizing their workflows and so on. We started to develop an opinion for what accounts for that difference. There's a few things that accounted for that difference that are specific to software, but I'm not going to go into those. I'm going to go into how people worked and created their workflows. So I'll give you just a few random tips, and then we can open it up into a further discussion or questions. The first thing that we noticed, the people who were more productive using these tools weren't, when they were using these tools to tackle some complex project, we're not trying to tackle some complex project by taking a whole bite of the elephant at one time. What's really interesting is that if you've ever worked with software developers, you'll notice that they break things up into stories. So here's a new website, and maybe one of the features is to log in. Maybe another feature is single sign-on. Maybe another feature is automatic email notifications, and so on down the line. The most productive engineers who were having AI write the code for them were actually the developers who maintained the discipline for breaking down the tasks that they were going to tackle, even though the AI was actually going to write some of the code for them. So you got to think, let that sink in a little bit. You might think that maybe the most productive people are the people who are just going to try and toss the whole problem at an AI system and let the AI system figure it out and spit out the right answer. But that's actually wrong, because in those cases, they actually spent more time trying to refine the answer, working and then reworking, working and then reworking. Whereas what was counterintuitive and impressive to me was that the developers who maintained the discipline, yes, it's a new sexy world where the AI can work for you. What they actually did instead was they stuck to the very disciplined breakdown of tasks, prioritization of tasks, detail-oriented for each task, and then took one of those tasks and used an AI agent, like one of the tools that Jacqueline recommended, or just plain old ChatGPT in one of its models, and focused just on that task and iterated on that task until it got to a place where it was polished enough that they were happy with it. And then what they did is called that task done and then pulled off the next task, or reprioritized based on what they learned, for reprioritized the remaining backlog of tasks, and then took the next one and then focused on that next one and kept going. What was interesting, and the reason that was actually more productive, to be more disciplined about how you work, not less disciplined, was because the context got smarter and smarter. So if the people took the time to be very detailed with these tickets, user requirements, test cases, things like that, and loaded them into the context of the ChatGPT or whatever tool that they were using. And once the code got to a good, stable place, passed all the tests, was good, was correct, they manually checked it, then they loaded in the next task, keeping everything within the same context, building the context like layers of a cake over and over again until it was this beautiful, delicious cake that you would eat, only it was a software product or whatever. So that's tip number one. Quick little tip for you all. Sometimes it feels, because these systems are really magical, or they feel magical, it feels like I'm just going to give it a brain dump and start to work on that. And that works for the first draft, 100%. But at a certain point, what you want to do is take a step back and really start to break it up into tasks, and then feed those tasks, tackle those tasks one at a time, just like you would any other complex project. I think that's the big misnomer, right? Is that, yes, it makes complexity easier, but the tools for managing complexity are just tools for proper thinking, not necessarily magic wands, and especially not magic wands in the age of AI. So first little tip for you there.
Before you move on to tip
Yes, go
tip
ahead.
2, sorry, I want to add something. It's also the reason why when you're trying to offload what you're doing is it should take days, weeks, not hours. I think, like Frank was saying, we've got these like sexy tools that can do all of these things. Whatever it is that you're doing, you've developed so much knowledge around that subject and you know so much. And so if you really spent the time to break it down, it's going to take a lot longer. But the more work you do up front, especially how we've identified it, whether it's in software development or customer service or in sales, the better these tools are going to be in offloading the productivity to them when you're going and accomplishing. And it's just proven time and time again, whether you're 10x more productive, 4x, 1x, it really depends on how you break it down.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And this obviously applies for a big complex project, and you break it down and everything, and then you use AI in parallel with that structure. But it also works for very easy tasks. So one example is I was making a budget, a meal plan for my daughter who just moved into a dorm room last year. So she needed a budget and the foods that she was going to buy, how much we were going to spend, and so on. So it's not a big multi-month campaign or product launch or whatever, but breaking it down into those kinds of requirements or tasks or steps actually yielded really much better results with ChatGPT. In my case, was the model I was using. And actually, this leads me to the second little point here, and I'll try to speed it up here because I know we got 15 minutes or so. But the second point is what we also noticed when people were the most effective with these tools was that they thought about, I'll use the term test cases for their prompts or test cases for the results and requirements for the results that were coming back from the model. So a good example here are taking the time to define the characteristics of the response up front. And it's a great thought exercise. So for example, if you're working with legal documents or something like that, and you're going to ask the ChatGPT to write you a contract or to answer questions about a legal contract or whatever it is, you want to consider what the specifications, if you will, of what the response should be. So it should be things like, okay, for this particular response, I need it to be jargon-free. For this particular response, I need a citation of the exact text that you're going to be using to reason about your answer. For this particular response, I need it to be concise, no more than whatever X, Y, or Z. And so they actually took the time to almost paint a template for the prompts, for the models. And the AI models would then use that template and fill in that template. That cut down so much time because if you take the time to figure out it's a thought exercise where you figure out what you need, and the AI can use its infinite knowledge of all the world and all humans to start filling in the blanks, and it works much faster. Another little tip regarding this, sometimes you want to double check it and ask it to check itself. And so this is a great also little tactic for reducing hallucinations. Is particularly a good example would be a legal document. So you're working through, suppose you're working through a model, or you working with a model to help you interpret a complicated legal document. What we saw was some teams actually take specific clauses and specific numbers and calculations from the contract. So they read them manually, thought about them manually. And in the responses and in the prompts that they were generating, they would always make sure that those numbers always correlated back to actual reference things in the document itself. For example, if you asked it to calculate, I don't know, the summation of some quarterly fee structure, they would ask it only to test. They actually knew what the summations were. So, and they knew what the facts were. But occasionally whenever they were forming their prompt, they would add clauses in there to make sure that the right information was always pulled back and it never hallucinated. And so when it did make some fact up, because sometimes it'll give you bullshit, then they caught it because, hey, I know that number is supposed to be 157,052 cents or whatever. And so that paused them to recraft and think carefully about what they were doing in the prompt that was causing it to give non-deterministic answers that would continue to switch. So there's another little tactic for you all to, when you're breaking up the work or when you're taking on an AI task, use more discipline to break it up and prioritize it, not less. And think a little bit about the specifications or the requirements for the responses, what you need the responses to look like, rather than relying on the model and its memories of you where it tries to tailor what the answer that you think you want, or that it thinks you want, right? Actually give it a specification for what you're expecting, and the results are much, much better. I don't know if you want to add anything to that little tip, Jacqueline.
No, but you made me think of another tip. So I'm going to give a third tip or fourth tip if you're done with your tips, because you
I've got two more and I'll keep them short.
Yeah, no, you don't need to. We've got time.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, got it. All right. So second to last tip here is we also found that the best quality and the best collaboration actually came out when the teams were upfront about the level of AI that they were using for particular like work piece or content. This one was really fascinating. And this one was one that I noticed in my own line of work. Actually, last week we had a big company camp where we got in together and we worked on strategy and so on. So we were all using AI and so on. And we stumbled upon this one ourselves rather than through one of the teams that we help manage. Why is it so important for the teammates to be upfront about the level of AI for a specific work product? It's because it's the amount of feedback that people are willing to get depending on who generated it and its stage of maturity. So for example, when our team got together to generate a new document or a new strategy document, for example, when it was very obvious that, hey team, here is our first draft, but you know what? It's 90% AI generated. And here are the input prompts that we gave it, right? Here's what we think our mission and our vision and all the stuff is. And then here was the output. And this is all like a first draft. And we think actually the first draft is really good. When everybody knew that, then we were much more willing to be creative, to strike things down, to change it, to start all over, compared to when people thought that the director of a department came down from the mountain with the stone tablets. This is the strategy document. But what was unsaid, or what was tacit, was unsaid here, was that actually the director was also using the AI tools. And the director also assumed that maybe everybody's also using AI. So we all have this like tacit agreement that we can trash it and everything, but it wasn't clear. And maybe it'll be clear more in the future as we all figure out how to work with these tools. But it was absolutely important to say what stage it was in. And then critically, as we got, let's say, more mature document or more mature content, we've been iterating on it. We've been improving the stuff that the AI gave us and so on. And so over time, it was more and more a human product, like a human produced item. Then in those cases, because actually what's important is the collective buy-in and the collective shared mind for what's going on. Once that's mostly solidified, then it's less and less only or purely AI generated. Then it's really important to call that out, because at those later stages, now the feedback must be different. Now the feedback could be more stylistic versus strategic to completely change the strategy or pivot the company, right? Where maybe that would have been more acceptable at the beginning because it was AI generated anyway. But at the later stages, actually, no, this is feedback from the humans who are going to live and breathe and pay their bills with this document. This needs to be treated with more care. Second to last tip, penultimate tip for you all, tactics that we picked up that we realized learned. So if you're working with your team and nobody's upfront to the degree of AI generated products that you're collaborating on, then it's something that you definitely want to start to maybe imagine putting it on the bottom right-hand corner of your documents saying, this is 90% human, or this is 10% human, mostly AI, have at it. So something to think about. Last little tip, and this one is my favorite. Let me bring up my little notes here, is strategy and strategic thinking with these AI tools and whatever model that you want. It doesn't really matter. Here, let me I got some notes here, excuse me.
I would say some would make an argument it does matter.
Yeah, so
I'm just joking.
It does. Yeah, that's right. It's super important. It's super important. There's a strategist that I love and I follow. I have his book on my, what's it called? Nightstand. And for those of you who may not be familiar with him, his name is Richard Ramel. He he's a strategy professor at Harvard. I think he teaches at UCLA now. He is a prominent figure in the field of strategy and business strategy, and he's like hugely recognized as a significant contributor to the strategic thinking and so on. And he's got a book. It's called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And I think it was released about 10 years ago. Check it out. Highly recommend it. If you squint, it's actually a life help book also, because what good strategy isn't life help? But what's super interesting about this is this prominent world-renowned figure on strategic thinking. This is his framework for looking at a strategy and determining whether or not it's structured well, like it's a good strategy. Now, here's the key. A good strategy is not necessarily a successful strategy. That's very different. So for now, a good strategy is well formed, and it's formed in such a way that it's logically consistent and in such a way that you can actually share it with people, they understand it, and they can actually execute it, right? So if people can understand your strategy and they can execute it, honestly, that's 60% of the battle, right? Just any old strategy executed well is better than the perfect strategy that who knows when it comes out, right? So you learn a lot even with an imperfect strategy. Here's what's really interesting. ChatGPT knows this framework, and it knows his work, and it knows all of the strategists who have cited him and used his work and so on. And so when you're thinking through a problem and you're trying to form a strategy to solve that problem, you can go ahead and type out your strategy or whatever it is and give it to ChatGPT, and you can ask it, please, using Richard Rummel's framework, world famous, renowned strategist from Harvard, can you double check this strategy? Does it fit into the framework? Is it a good strategy in the style of Richard Rummel's framework for whatever, or whatever framework you enjoy, whatever you like? And here's the powerful part. You can say, pretend you're Richard Rummel, right? Because it's really good at adopting roles and taking up styles and thinking in certain modes, and ask it to critique your strategies and so on. And it's actually super, super important, right? Because it'll actually walk you through, okay, does this strategy document, is it clear about the diagnosis of the situation? Like, what's the challenge? Like, what is really preventing you from achieving your goal, right? Because if your strategy is to grow 15%, that's not really a strategy. What is preventing you from growing 15%? That's the part you need to get to, right? What is the overall guiding policy for it? So like overall, how are you going to do it? And then finally, do you have specific coherent actions? So not just a laundry list of actions that you need to do, but actions that actually build on each other in such a way that the sum of all of the actions is greater than, or the whole of all the actions is greater than the sum of the individual actions, right? So nature has all kinds of phenomenon like that where, 2 + 2 = 5 kinds of situations. Surprisingly, it's really good at that. So I really recommend pick your favorite strategist, pick your favorite thinker, write your strategy document, probably using the help of AI, and then feed it back and ask it to critique your strategy. And it will increase the likelihood that you have a good, well-formed, shareable, thought out strategy. It can't tell you if it's going to succeed, though. You have to execute the strategy and see if it worked. But it will tell you if it's properly structured, which is actually very powerful. So that's it. 4 big tips that we've learned watching people work, and also within our company of 350 people, something like that. I'll leave it there, Jacqueline, if you have anything to add or the audience wants to chime in.
Yeah. I actually want to add, because you brought up something really good, because you were talking about what we've observed with the 300 folks that we've been working with, and an exercise that Frank and I did a couple of years ago was, what are we really good at? What are the things that we are better at? And what are our weaknesses? And there's actually a really great book that you can get. There's no affiliation with it whatsoever. Patrick Lencioni, he wrote a book. It's called The 6 Types of Working Genius. It's a very quick read. And he basically makes the argument that there are geniuses in us all. And some of us have certain geniuses compared to others. And we have 2 main areas of genius. And one of them is more formed than the other. And it's things like the genius of wonder, the genius of invention, the genius of discernment, the genius of galvanization, the genius of enablement, and the genius of tenacity. And it's all of these like natural gifts that each of us have that are unique to us. And through this exercise, I realized something really important about myself. I started this company, Howdy. I went from 0 to 1. We're now pretty big, but I'm not an innovator. I'm not an inventor. That is not like my areas of expertise. The idea for Howdy came because I was really just trying to make something better that already existed. I was very frustrated with the way, if I was a tech company and I wanted to hire software developers overseas, there was no good solution. I hated all the solutions that already existed. So I didn't invent anything. I just made this business better. And that's where Howdy came. And I'm not an innovator. I'm not a wonderer. I'm really good at discernment. I'm really good at galvanizing. I'm really good at iterating on something. And I'm really good at getting a lot of people excited to do it with me. Now, what does that mean? That means one of my areas that I'm not good at is a blank page. I suck when it comes to a blank page. It's very intimidating for me. And conversely, Frank, he loves a blank page. He sees it's very inspiring. He gets motivated. And it's one of the reasons why we work really well together, because we'll come up with an idea and Frank will be like, can I take the first stab at it? And I'm like, oh my God, please take the first stab at it. Like, I want like the fourth stab. And I say this because if you're a solopreneur or if you're doing something by yourself, reading that book, it's really insightful to learn where are your areas of excellence and your areas where you fall short. And then also leveraging the powerful tools that exist out there to help fill in those gaps. So one of the beautiful things and why I used brainstorming and drafting as like a huge time suck for me is because it used to be a huge time suck. Now I go to ChatGPT, they get to give me my first draft or my second draft or my fourth draft. And then I get to do the thing that I get really excited about. And it's really a massive tool that can help you fill in a lot of gaps and can help your team fill in a lot of gaps. And the feedback and the tips that Frank shared, it's defined and it's definitive across over 300 data points. So hopefully that can give you a jump ahead as well. And I think we've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe for questions from the audience. I think I see a couple in the chat, but Darby, I'll let you handle this section.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. I think one that's a great lead in here is this a question related to why Latin America specifically for your resources when you're hiring. Is your model for Latin American hiring a proven cookie cutter for other regions around the world, or is there any particular reason why you guys have focused on that specific region?
Yeah, I can take this one real quick. And Frank, of course, if there's other things you want to add, please, by all means. Why LATAM specifically? I was at a small company. We were working with a team overseas in Eastern Europe. Phenomenal team, amazing team. But with a small team, the most important thing is having communication overlap. And it was really frustrating having to wait 24 hours. So if you had a question for the product team or for someone that was working in Eastern Europe, you'd ask it, they're probably asleep. You go to bed, you wake up the next morning, and it just created so much delay. And being a small company, time is everything, and it was crucial. And I remember thinking, man, there are smart people all over the world. There's smart people in South America. Like, why can't we just connect with them better in a way that we have overlapping working hours? Culturally, they're more assimilated and more similar. A lot of our American media is exported down to South America, whereas if you go further around the globe, they're less closely connected to America, American culture, American media. So it really just felt like an extension of my team working with folks in Latin America. And I wanted to be able to leverage that and give that to other folks here in the US. I do believe it is a good cookie cutter model for the other parts of the world, but there's just so much talent and there's so much opportunity on the Western Hemisphere. That's just where we've decided to be laser focused. Greg, if you want to add
Makes
to
a lot
that.
of sense. I feel like the time difference, just in my experience working with our own hire that we went through you, is it's nice to have that same schedule and cadence and not know that you're overlapping, significantly if you're working with Eastern Europe or.
And you're totally right, Darby. And there's other companies that will have folks in the Philippines and they're like, no, they work US hours. I'm like, I don't want my team to have to live like that. That stinks.
Yeah, that you don't get the best out of them. So it really does stink for their families, their friends. It hurts with retention. It hurts with focus and energy because their sleep is a little bit off. And there's also a little bit of a power dynamic where I'm the core team, either because we're the paying customer or whatever dynamic that is, however we define it. The core team is in the United States, and I am wasting their time, and I have to be efficient, and because I'm like at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. my time or whatever, and that little like power dynamic also stifled collaboration. So that was a common, what was it? Like a proposed workaround. Let's have them work US hours, but I don't think that was sustainable either.
That's fair. I have some people are asking how can they get a hold of you guys, contact info, or best to just get in touch if they have questions and want to reach out to you guys further. I'm not sure what the best email you'd want to shoot out to people, but
We've
however
got
they
a
best contact
couple,
y'all.
depending on who you want to contact. You can always go to howdy.com. That's the first and foremost place, the easiest place to get to us. But we have a sales at howdy.com. We have an info at howdy.com. If you want to reach out to Frank or I individually, it's just our first initial. So it's J at howdy.com for me, Jacqueline, or F at howdy.com for Frank.
Thank you.
And whatever you don't send us a LinkedIn message. It's useless. LinkedIn messages are pointless. It's like driving on the highway at 250 miles an hour and trying to read the billboards. Like it doesn't make any sense. There's too many of them now. So much spam.
Connect with us on LinkedIn, but don't send us a message.
Yes, don't contact us that way. It's just too spammy now. It's useless.
That's great. We have a couple more minutes left here. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about the network you have built to foster a sense of community and team building within Latin America, especially when you're hiring for organizations that are scaling and are in need of not just one or two employees, where it's a smaller team. And that's my situation, and I'm totally cool with that. But you also work with hiring multiple developers. I think that's a really cool, unique thing that you guys bring to the table. If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two different ways we look at it. So there's the community aspect and then there's the technical support aspect. I'll talk about community, Frank, you can talk about technical support.
Sure.
When we first started hiring folks in Latin America, I thought, oh yeah, the software developers there probably going to be like the software developers here. They're going to be more isolated. They're going to be more into just like this. It's stupid stereotypes, right? It's just the stereotypical software developer that likes to play video games and is more like less socially inclined to go out. I was completely wrong. It turned out that, especially we're in our first office in Montevideo, Uruguay, the software developers there are very social. They're very outgoing. They're like the social butterflies of all of the different, let's just say, industries. And so folks didn't want to work for us because they're like, no, I don't want to be by myself. I want to be a part of something. I want to be a part of an office with people so I can go to, I want to go to happy hours. And so that really was like the impetus for us creating what we call our Howdy houses. And it's where we create these kind of co-working spaces for all of our developers to join and work out of, where it is Class A, Silicon Valley style working spaces where it's the best of the best location where people can come and work out of. They're not forced to work out of it unless their like company wants them to work every single day, where they can come and they can work with other folks. So even if it's just one person on a team or two people on a team, they feel like they're a part of a bigger community. Very similar to why co-working spaces here in the US work. It's you get to go and get out of your zone of being isolated. And so we created these Howdy houses to bring people together. And then we decided, wow, we're getting all of these developers together. Let's have some fun with it. Let's do weekly lunches. Let's do hackathons. Let's do tech talks. Let's invite people from the community to educate on something. Let's have games and competitions and let's give swag and let's like all you can imagine, but it's more, let's create an environment that's fun, that's collaborative, that's energizing, that lifts people up, that educates people in a way that, like Darby said, he hires one person. It's not just one person being alone, showing up at 8 a.m., leaving at 5 or whatever the working day is. It's this person who's showing up at 8. He's going and getting lunch, chatting with his friends. He's going back to work. He might have a technical problem. He can pat the guy to the left of him and ask him to help him out with it. It's really creating this like huge community of folks that have each other's backs while they may work for one person, or it may be a team of 10 that works for a bigger company. And then on the other side of the coin, we have an entire engineering mentorship layer to support them that Frankie can chat about.
Yeah. So for me, I started my career as a software engineer and leading software teams throughout my career, working with people from Moldova, Ukraine, Colombia, all over the world. And the problem for me was retention. So it was so painful when I had the star software developer that would all of a sudden, leading up to a huge project, quit. And then when I would ask why, I'd find out all the things that they were upset about. Because technically, although they were only working with me, the reality was that they were the employee of another traditional outsourcing firm. And if I had a magic wand at the time, I would have flown down there. I would have figured out how to incorporate my own company, hire my accountants and finance team, employ them, give them benefits, control their salaries, and all of those things. So that's the kind of support that I needed. And then that actually implies a lot of things, right? That means I'm going to need help with equipment. I'm going to need help with offices. If I have specific compliance requirements, then that means I'm going to need key card readers and security cameras and maybe even like a door attendant or something like that if we're dealing with financial information or whatever it is. And so from a technical perspective, it's not that I necessarily needed help with like project management or anything. What I needed help with was the strategy for my engineering department and how it was going to set up. And when department, I mean 100 engineers, right? So I really needed not just the technical help, but the logistical support, local market support, and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. That magic wand didn't exist. So Jacqueline and I built it. And that's essentially what Howdy is. There's that layer of support for bigger teams who need help with asset management, like laptops, who need help with compliance in remote locations. A good example is Coinbase. When we work with Coinbase, we have to pre-secure their laptops with all kinds of amazing security technology because we're talking about hundreds or millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrencies, right? So you're going to trust less, or it might even be impossible to work with an isolated engineer in Medellin, Colombia in his apartment. You don't want that shit on his laptop. You need an actual support infrastructure, somebody in the United States who is responsible for implementing these things in Colombia or wherever it is and hold accountable within the US jurisdiction, and along with all the other support and engineering mentorship and management and so on. So that's for bigger organizations, that's where we really hit another sweet spot for them and the way we help them.
I think something I thought was really cool when we first got to working together was how that support system was layered in and how you guys provide the benefits and provide that infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It never feels like when we have a technical issue developing our MarketSauce and the other tools that we're building, we have an issue. It's, hey, let me go and check in with some of the other dev to support and the other teams here. And so it feels like we're tapping into a much larger network of resources, but without the extra burden on me. He doesn't want to go and have to solve all those problems individually. Yes,
that's right.
But I still want to be able to provide that sort of support for anyone that I'm hiring. And you're just not going to find that through something like Upwork. It's a totally different way of approaching and hiring. You have a question, how do you find a good software developer for hire? I think that question can go a number of different ways. You guys obviously have a great system for finding and sourcing, vetting and interviewing, and like a 48-hour turnaround, which I don't know how much details we want to get into about what it looks like to hire through you. And you guys have some special deals for folks that are a part of the GenAI University community in our summit. But traditionally, when I'd go and hire any kind of help just from my own experience, you got to post a job, you got to vet through a bunch of candidates, you got to have individual interviews, do a test project and this sort of thing. And just the quality of being able to pair people up with the right talent, and it saves so much time. But then you're right immediately in a position where I can start to work with someone that I already know is already gone through several layers of vetting versus me or someone on my team that would have to go through and do that vetting. Again, for the right person, it's such a great resource, especially for scaling up. And I can only imagine the larger security deals that you're working with larger companies, like you mentioned. Those are complex problems that, as a founder or someone that's running a company's already got enough things to take care of on their own. It's nice to have, or at least know that this is a resource and an option for folks that are looking to scale up technology. Yeah. With that said, we're right here at the top of the hour, just a little bit over. Great session, guys. Did you guys enjoy that here? We're wrapping up day 2. What a great way to cap it off. A lot of great takeaways and a lot of insights that we'll have broken down as we get this content out and posted inside of our community. Would love to hear if you guys, anyone here live, did you guys enjoy that? Any good takeaways? And of course, if you guys have anywhere that someone could reach out to you if they're looking for any more tips or just curious about hiring software development help in general. We shared your emails, but I'm probably just heading over to howdy.com and letting them know that you're from the Scale with AI Summit or GenAI University, and then open the conversation from there.
Yeah, if you guys want to go to howdy.com/scale, and you can say you're from Scale too, and you'll get the $500 off. But if you wanted to go directly to howdy.com/scale, we have a special offer for everyone that joined the summit and also who are a part of the Gen AI University.
And you said that was $500 off, like a hire if someone does go through and hire.
Yes.
That's applied towards whoever they're hiring through you guys, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. It's generous of you guys to offer that. And I'm just excited about our partnership and how we're going to be able to continue to grow together over the course of the remainder of this year, but of course, 2025 and beyond. And for everyone that's tuning in with us here, thank you all for joining us for day 2 of the Scale with AI Summit. We'll be back tomorrow live and ready to rock and roll 9 a.m. Central Standard Time to finish the summit out with day 3. We've got a lot of great sessions planned for you tomorrow. And until then, keep calm and AI on, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Cheers, y'all.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Bye.